Welcome to part 2, and we are now going to talk about elementary walking, which is the second stage, the first being initial elementary, then mature stages of locomotion. So some of the characteristics of elementary walking include a smoothing of movements and an increase in step length. The arms now fall by the sides, but there is limited swing. There is a heel-toe contact rather than full footsteps. The base of support shrinks to be around the shoulder width, and the footfall rate increases around 140 footfalls. In our video that we saw earlier in the last lecture, PD would be in elementary walking. The mature gait is characterized by a reflexive arm swing, a narrowed base of support, and an increased step length, a definite heel-to-toe contact, and 120 footfalls per minute. So the proficient walking pattern is similar to the mature walking pattern. The absolute stride length increases. There's a definite heel then forefoot pattern. There's a reduction in toeing out, which narrows the base of support laterally, and it keeps the forces exerted in the forward and backward plane. The pelvis rotates to allow for the full range of motion. Many adults actually do not even have a fully proficient walking pattern. For older adults over the age of 60, their step length decreases and they begin to toe out more. They have a reduced degree of ankle extension and their pelvis rotation reduces. They also have a shorter stride length and they tend to walk more slowly. Some rate controllers later on in walking include the fear of falling, pain from osteoarthritis, which leads to a decrease in the amount of walking they perform. Since they walk less, they have a decrease in muscle mass and flexibility, which then in turn also affects their walking pattern. So after we learn to walk, we progress to running about 6 months later. The main difference between walking and running is that there's a flight phase in running where neither foot is on the ground. Some of the rate limiters that affect the onset of walking include lower leg strength and balance control. Children must be able to acquire a certain level of strength to stand, balance, and propel themselves while being able to maintain an upright posture. The initial characteristics of running patterns include a wide base of support, flat-footed walking, high guarded arms, limited leg swing, and stiff, uneven legs. The elementary walking shows improvements in increased stride length, arm swing, speed, and the inclusion of a flight phase. The mature running gait has even more stride lengthening, a clear flight phase, complete leg extension, an oppositional arm swing, and more increases in speed. We'll watch a couple of videos that go over some runners at different ages and try and categorize while watching their running into a certain stage. You can see that their running is definitely in the initial stage, as they are not really having a flight phase, their arms are high, kind of stumbling around a little bit, not really sure entirely what's going on. Now let's see the 3.5-year-old running. You can see that she has a definite flight phase, but her arms are still in the low guard position, indicating that she's not quite mature yet because she is kind of stomping her feet when running, which is typical of an elementary run, but she's definitely not initial at this point anymore. So some common running problems include inhibited or exaggerated arm swing, improper foot placement such as flat footing or flipping of the foot, poor rhythm, asymmetries in gait, awkward twisting of the trunk or exaggerated trunk lean. Many times you see this when you see people running on the street. Honestly, most of us, minus the actual runners in the group, tend to have at least one of these problems. Personally, I lean too far back with my torso, and I land with a little bit of foot flipping, hence I have some weird ankle problems. Some of the changes that we see in walking exist in running later on in older adulthood. In this study conducted by Nelson in 81, he found that the old ladies in here did not tuck their recovering leg as completely, had a shorter stride length, took fewer strides, jogged slower, ran slower, and had a slower maximum speed. In the previous lecture, we discussed the Zelazo experience, and we found that enhanced motor experience improved the onset of walking, meaning the infants who practiced the stepping reflex walked earlier than the infants in the other group. Thielen performed a similar experiment and had infants walk on a motorized treadmill, and found that the rhythmic pattern was present when infants were placed on the treadmill. The technique of treadmill stepping is now being used to help children with various disabilities acquire motor skills. Studies have shown that infants with Down syndrome have started walking earlier with the assistance of treadmill training. Infants with Down syndrome usually don't start walking until about 2 to 3 years, and research conducted at the University of Michigan has actually shown that these treadmill training interventions will have children with Down syndrome walk earlier. If you're interested in that, look up any work that Dale Ulrich has done, or our own faculty, Janet Hawk, when she was at Michigan for her PhD, did some work with Down syndrome infant walking as well. Another thing that affects walking is the motivation to walk. For example, a blind child shows delays in skills that involve moving around the world. These skills include delays in reaching, crawling, creeping, and walking, and it's suggested that this is due to the lack of motivation to search and explore the environment around, because they are limited in the amount of sensory stimulation that they get, because they cannot see. Some of the environmental constraints that may affect walking include gravity. For example, since there's only 1/6 of the gravity on Earth and on the Moon, astronauts tend to adopt a different gait pattern and prefer hopping as their primary form of locomotion when in space. Since there's no gravity, they do this weird hop thing instead of actually walking. So now we're going to move on and talk about jumping, because there are also developmental changes that take place. We need to look at the onset and when a child can perform certain jumping, the distance and the height of the jump, and the jumping form or pattern. Initial jumping is characterized by young jumpers executing a vertical jump, even if they are trying to jump horizontally. By 3 years, children can change their trunk angle and take off to distinguish between a horizontal and vertical jump. In terms of leg movements, the initial jump has little preparatory crouch. The legs are not fully extended during takeoff, and they do not use 2 feet to take off or to land. This pictogram goes over the Proficient horizontal jump and the stages of horizontal jumping. I'll let you guys go over this on your own in the textbook. This pictogram goes over the Proficient vertical jump. It should be noted that not all people master the jump, even in adolescence and adulthood. I was just at a conference this past week, and this was something that was a big topic of discussion because many researchers were finding that adolescents and college-age adults were not proficient in a lot of basic motor skills, such as jumping, which they should be.
Go. Whoa, good one. Try again.
So this concludes our lecture, and the textbook outlines the stages of development of each of these motor skills, and I'd recommend going over those. We went over these concepts, and I will I'm cutting this lecture off so we don't have a part 3. So I will see you guys later.